Happy Father's Day. I'm John Kirkwood, and I know that this fourth episode, where we talk about finding yourself, again, after you've walked away from your faith tradition, it coincides with Father's Day, and I didn't do this on purpose, but it's kind of fitting. Some people have nothing but gratitude on a day like today, and for some people it's more complicated. Some people it's grief. Some people it comes with baggage that we have to unpack, we have to sort through. Some people it requires therapy sessions. But wherever you are, whether it's gratitude or grief or a little bit of a mixture of both, this will be for you today. There are many people who deconstruct who end up having father issues or daddy issues because they've grown up in a family and a tradition with expectations, and they have disappointed along those lines by walking away from the faith. And many times the lines are blurred between who you are and your identity from the family expectations. Maybe, and in many cases, I think in evangelical Christendom, we've grown up in a place where obedience is regarded as faithfulness, and it required obedience to feel loved. And as you grow older and you unpack that and you start to put those numbers together, and some of us learn it at an earlier stage. We see those who are praised, we see those who are celebrated, we see those who are privileged, and they're the obedient ones. They're the ones who don't ask difficult questions. They're the ones who go along with the program, and so forth. And that makes it a little bit harder to unpack when you've deconstructed, when you walked away and maybe you've been shunned by your own family or shamed by your own family. So I want to talk to you about that today. We talk today about what it means to leave the tribe, right? How to find your own identity now, and what it means. Especially when you've been taught that obedience equals love. Now that sounds really conditional. It's actually transactional. And if you've grown up in the church, you have mixed messages on that. Now, my parents weren't that way, but the majority of people we grew up around were. In other words, there was unconditional love in my family. And my father used to say, when he was talking about salvation and the love of God, he'd say it's not based on merit, performance, or production. He'd say that from the pulpit, but the pew maybe didn't hear that, because most of the people I knew in the evangelical movement really regarded obedience at a high level, and it was transactional. And the obedient were the favored ones, the celebrated ones, the praised ones, the privileged ones. So that is kind of a commitment to unpacking this. And maybe you've been taught this either from a father or a pastor, or maybe you've been taught this about God. Not by words, like my father's words would deny that merit, performance, or production were a part of it. And yet the whole tribe I grew up around said the opposite in their actions and reactions, and the way they treated their children, or the way they treated those who leave the church or maybe even leave the faith. And oftentimes that story of the prodigal son is told from merely the father's perspective. But sometimes leaving is what it takes to find the real you, or to honor the real you, because you've lived in a closet. and you haven't been comfortable with it. You've been forced to wear a pair of wooden shoes that don't fit. And you finally get so frustrated, you shed the shoes and you say, no, I can't live in these anymore. And I can't live in this cell anymore. Your whole life takes on the idea that you are captive in a cell. And you have to break free. You have to liberate yourself. And so sometimes, yeah, it's leaving. Now, some people leave without ever going. Husbands stay in the church to please their wife, even though they're not there when they're there. They've come to kind of an unspoken agreement. Children do this early on too. Children who have outgrown what they're forced to do under their parents' roof, and they distract themselves while they're there. So some people are there, but they're not there. And then there's some of us who have walked away. And the tribe will call that rebellion. The tribe will call that heresy. It'll call it apostasy. It'll call it blasphemy. It'll call it loving the world and not loving the Father, even if you still love God and admire Christ and still have an arrangement with the Bible that isn't completely disengaged. It's just different. So what do you do on the other side of certainty? Well, for most of it's getting to know ourselves. Getting to know ourselves again. Dr. Ramani, who's the foremost expert, I think, on narcissistic personality disorder and survivors of relationships that have to do with a narcissist, she has talked about so many good things. And now in my introduction to her, I kind of escaped where I thought I'm going. Oh, no, I remember now. But Dr. Ramani talks about survivors that she's interviewed who they don't know how to order a pizza when they're out on their own because they've never had the opportunity. They don't know what the freedom to think on their own is like. Like, what do they like on pizza? Because their fathers have always ordered it for them, or their husbands. And now it's up to them, and they can't make a decision. This is one of the things that people find hard to reckon with when they come out of a controlling system, is the freedom and what to do with it. And to some, it's scary. It's just no different than when we actually saw, emancipation happen in the American South. And there were some slaves that were afraid to leave. Their whole life had been on the plantation. They knew the rules there. They knew what got rewarded, what got punished. It might not have been great, but that's what they knew. And there was a comfort level there. And they were scared because they didn't know what's outside that however many acres their plantation was. This happens to men who've been incarcerated for long periods of time. It was showcased, of course, in Stephen King's, the movie made out of Stephen King's novella, Shawshank Redemption, where you had one of the characters who, after many years of being incarcerated, was released, and he felt so out of place, so far from home, that he ended up taking his own life because he just couldn't fit in that world. There was no library cart to push from cell to cell. So, what do we do when we're on the other side of certainty? Well, in some way, we have to parent ourselves because we've lost that, or reparent it, if you see it that way. Spiritually, at least, you have to become the guide. You have to weigh what is positive and negative, what is an asset and a liability. You have to get comfortable with making decisions and with trusting yourself. And that might take a while, it might take a bit. and to become your own guide, to become your own nurturer, especially when you're also dealing with what's happening from your rear view. The sniping that takes place behind your back, the relationships that might have been lost or compromised or estranged. You may be trying to wrap your head around all kinds of different things, including how to make a living, not just how to live or how to adapt, how to order a pizza. And so this is a lot to unpack. I mean, freedom is wonderful, and there's so much joy and exhilaration in being able to free yourself from ignorance and to be able to lean into your curiosity and to actually appreciate diversity for the first time in a long time, and not to fear shadows and ghosts and boogeymen. And yet it does come with wounds that need to be tended, and with growth. And in many cases, it's like the women have been kept captive for years in some madman's basement, and then you're set free, and you don't just go from that setting to living a normal life. You need to unpack what happened. You need to grasp with what is reality now, and possibly to seek help. Probably to seek help with therapists or with people who can help you unpack these traumatic experiences. All our lives we've been told to honor our father and mother, and that has come at a cost in some of our relationships, because in some cases that was used for guilt or for control. And the idea of honoring your father and mother is following their instructions or doing whatever they told you to do. And some people carry this into, I mean, I've seen men and women in their 50s and 60s and their 70s and 80s still trying to please mom and dad. And you all may know the story of the owner of the San Diego Chargers. Now his kids own the franchise, but his whole life, his whole mode of existence was in response to his father saying he'll never make it, that he'll never be anything worthy in life. And so all his success was attributed to trying to prove his father wrong, even after his father died. So some good things could come out of that, but that's not a good way to bring them about. It's a traumatic way. And I don't think he ever got to a healthy place. So you can look successful on the outside and still be trapped in a cobweb of toxicity or trauma that has been not dealt with. So how do you deal with the idea where you have a sacred text that tells you to honor your mother and father, and then you have a sacred person like Jesus saying, call no man father? Jesus doesn't get enough credit for all the ways he challenged what was taught at the time from the Bible thumpers, from the people who were speaking for God. And he probably grew tired of it. And you'd hear him say often, at least if we could believe what's told in the Gospels, you'd hear him often say, yeah, Moses has said that. Yeah, you're right, but I say this. Which, by the way, is not only tremendously courageous, but it's probably what got him killed. Right? So what do we do? Part of it is redrawing our own spiritual family tree. Some of you may not have a choice. You've been given a funeral. You've been maybe drummed out of the family, or you're the black sheep, or you're the one that causes embarrassment. And maybe that's why Father's Day is difficult to you. Maybe your father's gone now, but he died disappointed in you because you became yourself. He died disappointed in a person that you're proud of. You can't help that. There's no undoing that. There's no Rubik's Cube that's going to solve for that, because you were in two different worlds. And what meant the world to him to you was an affront now. To you was something that was ugly or primal or backwards, bigoted, ignorant. And maybe you didn't judge him for holding those values, but you couldn't live them anymore and feel healthy about it and feel good about it and feel that you could follow Christ's edict to love your neighbor or to love your enemy while you still held those beliefs. And so you walked out of the cave into a far country, but wasn't, but your whole tribe maybe saw you as the prodigal, but you saw it as enlightenment, as growth, as leaning toward the true, the good, and the beautiful. And so, if your father died disappointed in you because you were reaching for something that is life-giving, that is beautiful, that is healthy, how do you unpack that when it's not your fault? And in trying to please your father, you would be denying yourself who you are, who you're meant to be, your best life. I think many fathers who do love unconditionally, even if they feel different from you, would want you to become you, the right you, the you that really does embrace the true, the good, and the beautiful in their own life. And I've seen that happen, by the way. I've seen people deconstruct and go in opposite directions, and the family love is still held together because it's bigger than these other things. It's bigger than the tribal rules or the tribal expectations. You've seen this happen too. You've seen this happen with people who were homophobic until their child comes out of the closet, and then they change their thinking because out of love and respect for their child, they actually ask the question, well, maybe I'm wrong. maybe what I thought was true isn't. Maybe I should rethink or reevaluate my thoughts on this. And they do. And they find themselves mistaken. And they correct themselves. We've seen this happen, although all too often it's a rarity. So in some cases, you have to recast your spiritual family tree. And by the way, that family tree is much important than the one that you were born with. It truly is. I mean, I'm all for family love. But under some circumstances, you're betraying yourself to remain in the good graces of people who are trying to control you or manipulate you, or who think your true self isn't healthy or good or beautiful. In many ways, you're hurting yourself. Now, hopefully, you'll be in a situation where family adapts and respects you and loves you in spite of your belief systems or where you land. That's true love. That's true family. But if you can't get that with those you are born into, the family you're born into, the blood you're born into, you definitely need to find it outside of that circle. And you could, and it's not hard. My daughter and I were at a No Kings protest in Chandler yesterday, and I saw her bloom like a flower because she was around people who got her, who understood her without having known her for 15 years. Now, there are members in our family who don't know Poe, have no idea about Peyton, and yet strangers who met her and who asked to take pictures of her sign or who asked her why she was there and listened to her had a greater connection with her yesterday. Closer family. This happens everywhere. You don't have to go into a church to find this kind of community, or go back to a family reunion to find it. It's there. It's there to be found. It's not difficult. You might use an app. You might not need one. Anyway, we have to create a new family tree. And there are branches that we need to prune, right? So that the tree has a greater opportunity for life and fruitfulness. There are roots that are going to remain, and there is new growth that should be emerging and new strength. So, I do want to show you one thing that I got from a listener, who's actually a dear friend too. And forgive me, the quality isn't great, and it's my fault because I didn't have a lot of time to do this. But this was from something from Dr. Clark Van Gilder, who's a PhD psychologist, but he teaches physics. But anyway, he said he listened to the show 2 weeks ago on triggering, and he came up with this idea for possibly a book, 15 research questions that could be used in, kind of a thesis for a college student, or actually developed into a book, which I think he's leaning into. And I know you can't see it right there, so I've tried to break it down, but these are research questions on spiritual triggers and religious trauma. And I want to share the last one with you, but before I do, I'm going to share all of them with you. So here is psychological mechanisms. How do spiritual triggers manifest neurologically in individuals who have experienced religious trauma? That's one of his questions. Second, what is the relationship between early religious conditioning and the development of trauma-related disorders such as PTSD or CPTSD? To what extent do spiritual triggers align with somatic responses associated with other forms of trauma, abuse, war, neglect? And then we go to trauma and identity. How does the process of religious deconstruction affect personal identity development across different stages of life? In what ways does internalized shame from religious upbringing shape long-term self-esteem and attachment styles? How do individuals reconstruct moral frameworks after leaving a high-control religious environment? Which therapeutic modalities are most effective in addressing religious trauma and associated spiritual triggers? What role does narrative therapy play in helping individuals reinterpret and reclaim their religious past? And how does exposure therapy or somatic reprocessing affect sensitivity to spiritual symbols and language over time? Finally, I want to share these last 2 points with 6 questions with you, and focus on the last 3. Social and cultural dynamics. How do social reactions, shunning, conditional acceptance, which is all things we've been talking about lately, from faith communities impact the healing journey of deconstructing individuals? What are the common cultural features of religious systems that use shame as a behavioral control mechanism? How does the experience of religious trauma differ across cultural, denominational, or doctrinal lines? This is different for the Muslim, for the Christian, and for the Jew. It is different depending on what branch of Christianity you deconstruct from. Catholics are much more amenable to people who deconstruct from Catholicism, and they still consider them Catholics, than other branches of evangelicalism. How do individuals, what kinds of rituals, this is under spiritual reconstruction, this is what we talked about today. What kinds of rituals or spiritual practices do people find most healing after religious deconstruction? How do individuals define sacredness after leaving a tradition that previously monopolized the concept? Your idea of sacredness is going to change. And finally, what psychological benefits are associated with creating new liturgies or curated spiritual texts post-deconstruction? Something I recommend that you do. And what do I mean by that? Write your own Bible. Collect your own sacred texts. We all do this. There are things that resonate with us, whether we're reading Oscar Wilde, Dr. Seuss, or Saul of Tarsus. And we can collect those and bind those all in a single binding. And you can journal those and pass them on to your children after you die. As a matter of fact, one of the recommendations I would make to you is to continue journaling. If you were wounded by a father, a spiritual figure, if God himself became more of a threat to you, or has always been more of a threat to you than a comfort, well, that's not healthy and you know it. And at this point, you're going to lean into the true, the good, and the beautiful, because in Sunday school, you were told those were the attributes of God. So in essence, sometimes leaving Christianity gets you closer to the true Christ. Sometimes it's walking away from God and the Bible and Christ and Christians that brings you to the footsteps of the throne of God. Because if God is the true, the good, and the beautiful, and that becomes your daily pursuit and your daily celebration and the goals that give you meaning in life, aren't you getting closer to God? So my hope for you is, if you were once asked to stay small to be loved, you break those chains and you realize that wasn't a relationship, it was an incarceration. And today, accept the quiet revolution of change and growth for your own well-being. As a matter of fact, I got 2 recommendations for you today. Order a damn pizza with whatever you want on it. And begin the journal. If you haven't started yet, begin the journal. Become your own voice. Become your own protector. Become your own nurturer. This is a hard thing for many Christians to do who've been told all their life that they're scum, that they're hell-bound and hell-deserving, that they're not worth anything apart from God, that they're totally depraved. It's a really hard thing to be taught that self-care, you were taught self-care was prideful and a sin. You were taught that psychology, or even seeing a counselor, meant you were less faithful. You have to unpack all this in many ways, throw it all out, light it on fire, as the foolishness of a witch doctor compared to the Mayo Clinic or real science. So walk away from this tribe. You're not walking away as a rebel necessarily, even if that's the way they see you. You're walking toward your worth. You're walking toward not only your own well-being, but the well-being of those you love, your wife, your children, your husband, even your parents, even those that are left behind in the cave. You will become a better lover to even them, even if they become your enemy. It's true. It's not easy. I do want to leave you with one thing, though, because I've been beating you over the head with the idea of journaling. And I do want to share with you something Dr. Van Gilder shared with me. Let's see. Was it here? Here it is. He texted me this morning. I'm sorry, Clark, I asked to share your visual, but I didn't ask about this. I hope you don't mind me sharing this because it's so powerful. He said, by the way, the thing that prompted my inquiry, him putting together these 15 questions, was my mention of journaling, which is easily, he says, now this is coming from a psychologist, which is easily one of the most powerful tools a person can deploy to address and change their thinking on any topic. In my opinion, Dr. Clark Van Gilder says it is the most powerful tool. It's the most powerful tool to help you change and help you address things that need to be unpacked. Structured journaling is also something that a clinical psychologist would deploy if cognitive behavioral therapy was on the menu. And it would definitely be on the menu for a person in therapy for this. Now, there's some people who don't want to write. I get it. Hopefully, I'll have a gift for you in the not too different future. I am working on an AI journal, which would allow you just to speak it, right? Which you could do now if you just have a voice recorder. You speak into your phone and begin journaling that way through notes. Hopefully there'll be a better way in the future. I'd like to come up with an AI journal that you just talk into, and it daily keeps track of everything and also responds to you based on its understanding of the wisdom that you've trained its knowledge base on, from DSM-5 to Stoic philosophy to those passages in your liturgy that you've put together in your Bible that inspire you and bring you meaning. So anyway, begin the journal. Even if you don't want to write, speak it. Speak it. It will help. Anyway, thanks for your attention. I've gone longer than I planned on it. We will see you all next week.